Hi everyone, Heather here with astrologywithheather.com, and I am back with another special video. And today I'm going to be giving you guys a brief introduction to a very important topic in astrology, which is house rulerships. And so in modern Western astrology, house rulerships are often overlooked, not utilized, underutilized, or utilized inappropriately or incorrectly, mostly due to this misconception that the signs equal the houses equal the planets, which is a whole topic in and of itself. But today we're here to discuss house rulerships in traditional and modern astrology and how I use house rulerships in my practice and why you should too. So anyone who is watching this, who is interested in studying astrology and utilizing it to understand yourself, to understand your own experience, for greater self-awareness, and to help navigate this reality and what's happening right now, past, present, and future, should be understanding and utilizing and learning about house rulerships. This is a very important topic in astrology, and it can be the key to understanding your birth chart. And so if you've ever been perplexed because you look at your chart and you're like, Jupiter's in my second house, why don't I have piles of money? Why is my experience with finances so difficult? Or maybe there's another area of your chart. Maybe, you have Aquarius in your 11th house or Gemini in your 11th house, and you should be really social. And, modern Western astrology tells you that you should be this social butterfly, and you're not. You're more reclusive, or you just keep your friends fewer and more far between. House rulerships and understanding house rulerships can help you to identify the patterns that are contributing to these things, so you can understand your chart and how it corresponds to your life much more appropriately and much more fully, completely, and holistically. And so this is something in terms of techniques that I've utilized from the beginning. But when I first started out, there wasn't a lot of importance placed on house rulerships in a lot of the resources that I was looking into, because I started out with just modern Western astrology. And so I utilized them, in small bits and pieces here and there. But as I continued to develop my practice, as I continued to learn astrology, and as I continued to work on people's charts, when I first started out, I would just look at whoever would let me give them a reading, they would get a reading. Friends of friends, family members, friends, people on the street, whoever would let me look at their chart. I practiced. And the more I practiced, the more I realized that there are things that are missing when we're not looking at house rulerships. And so I began investigating this much more. And I still continue to learn and grow and develop my practice and develop the way that I utilize this technique. House rulerships can be a beginner's technique all the way to intermediate or super advanced, depending on what types of techniques you're utilizing with house rulerships and how intricate and complicated you decide to make it, because you can make it super overcomplicated, or it can be very, very straightforward and easy to utilize. And so I'm going to explain this in a way that's, more simplistic for those of you who are just new to house rulerships and are just getting started and want to know how you can incorporate this into your astrology readings or the way that you interpret your own chart for your own self-understanding. And before I get into that, I just want to make a quick announcement. So the reason that I'm really excited to talk about house rulerships right now is because I've been going over my notes and lesson planning and creating lectures and things like that, because I am doing a full 4-week in-depth course on house rulerships. This is going to be a course that's meant for those of you who already understand the basics, signs, planets, houses, aspects, and maybe have even dabbled with house rulerships, but you want to go much deeper. And so this course is going to begin on August 19th, and it's a 4-week course, and it's self-paced. So the lectures are going to be pre-recorded. The materials are going to be there for you, laid out each week. So you only have to devote a couple of hours each week to studying and going over these resources and practicing in your chart. But you can do it whenever you have the time. So it doesn't have to be, an astringent schedule if that doesn't work for you. And so the link to register is down in the description below. If you register now, you'll get $20 off. So you'll get this very comprehensive course at a discounted rate, and I'm going to walk you through all sorts of information to take you from a very beginner in house rulerships and understanding this technique all the way through to intermediate and even some advanced techniques. And so you're going to get a very comprehensive understanding of this through this course. But before we get into that course, I just wanted to kind of give you guys an example, or at least a couple of examples of what house rulerships are and what they can do for you. And so basically, the theory behind house rulerships, or the technique, the way that it works, is that the sign that occupies the house in whole sign houses, and I use whole sign houses for this specifically because it is a more traditional technique, and I've played with both house systems, and whole sign houses works much better. It's much more accurate to describing actual events and situations in a person's life, and it has much more predictive value. And when you want to make accurate predictions in astrology, you need to understand house rulerships first before you get into any of the timing techniques, or else you're not going to see the whole picture and you're going to miss a lot of really key information. And so this is actually going to be the first in a predictive astrology series. So a series of courses I'm going to be doing on predictive astrology, but house rulerships had to happen first because you need this information, and a lot of people either have it in bits and pieces or they don't have it at all, and that's why it's hard to make really accurate predictions in astrology. You need to have this concept. And so basically the concept is that the sign that occupies the house in whole sign houses, the planet that rules that sign is going to be the ruler of that house. And so in order to explain it a little bit more clearly, if your first house is occupied by Taurus, if you are a Taurus rising, then Venus is going to be the ruling planet that rules your first house. And so in order to get additional information about first house topics, which are especially important, this would actually be the ruler of your whole chart, the ruler of the fourth house. So Venus would be your chart ruler if you are a Taurus rising. And so in order to get additional information about first house topics, which pertain to the self, the way that you project your energy outwardly, the way people perceive you, your life goals, orientation, direction, major life themes, the health of your body and your physical appearance, all of these first house types of issues, you'll get way more information if you're also looking at Venus. And Venus will have these correspondences or associations to the energy in your first house. And so if Venus, for example, is in your sixth house, a major life theme or a major topic of focus for you could be sixth house types of things: acts of service, health, hard work, all of these sixth house things that we think about when we think about the sixth house, which is the house of work, daily routines, service, and health. Those themes would become more predominant. And so basically what happens is when the ruler of one house, the planet that rules one house, is placed in another house, is that the topics of those two houses merge or are connected in a way that they wouldn't otherwise be connected. And so even though Venus doesn't typically have anything to do with your goals and your orientation and your major life themes, or it kind of has to do with your appearance in terms of your personal style, but your physical body and appearance or your physical health, looking at Venus, if it's the ruler of the first house, will give you additional information into those topics that are not normally Venusian. So hopefully that makes sense just to kind of start out, but I'm going to give you some examples here. So we're going to take a look at a famous chart, and this is actually going to be the chart of Walter Mercado, who is a famous performer and astrologer. And so very recently there's been a documentary on Netflix about Walter Mercado and his life and his experience. And so as I was going through and watching this, as I do with most documentaries, I pulled up his chart and I was looking at it, and I was just completely astonished as to how accurately his chart described a lot of the experiences that were portrayed in the documentary. And before I pull up this chart, I do want to say that this chart's a little controversial. I shared it on Instagram actually, and a lot of people were like, oh my goodness, no, Walter Mercado is a Pisces. And so one of the things I should say about Walter Mercado is that he seemed to be a performer first and foremost, and an astrologer kind of secondary to that. And so his performances were very elaborate. His style was very elaborate. He was very showy. He was definitely a performer. And part of his act, part of his persona that he projected included a backstory about a very dramatic event where he was born on a boat, and he made himself a Pisces for this event. The actual documentation of his birth says otherwise, and so what I'm using is the chart based on his actual birth certificate, which we do have. So he is a Taurus, not a Pisces, so some of you might be a little shocked by that if you're familiar with his work or if you've read stuff about him because you watched the documentary, because a lot of the mainstream sources and like articles and stuff that talk about his death actually list his birth as being March 9th of 1932, and that isn't actually accurate. And so basically, this is the chart. I'm going to scoot over a little bit of Walter Mercado. And so in the documentary, one of the things that was a major theme was not only his rise to fame and, you know, how he kind of showed up in the world and his contribution to the world, but it was also about his hardships and these sort of downfalls that happened as a result of some legal issues with his manager, and the financial implications of that were very predominant as well. And so the thing that stuck out to me that I thought would be a really great example for you guys is the second house. And the second house typically rules finance, right? It rules finance and money and material possessions. If you're looking at this just based on planets placed in the houses, you're looking at his second house and saying, there's not a lot of activity here. You know, second house themes of money might not be very important in this man's life, which is definitely not true for him. If you're looking at this again from a modern Western perspective, not including house rulerships, you might also want to look at Venus in terms of his wealth and, you know, his money situation. Venus is very nicely placed in the sign of Pisces, and it's making positive aspects to the moon and to Mars, and even a wide sextile to Saturn. And so Venus doesn't seem very problematic either. So why would he have these financial struggles and these power struggles with his finances as a result of these legal battles? And so this is just to kind of demonstrate here what's going on. So Gemini in the second house, you know, maybe he makes his money through communication, through media. I mean, there's stuff that you can kind of get from that, right? There's information that you can get from that. What does he value in terms of, you know, his money, those types of things. However, it doesn't give you any sort of understanding as to why he would have all of these prominent themes of finance in his life. When you look at this through the lens of house rulerships, it changes things. And so his second house is dominated by Gemini, and so his second house is ruled by the planet Mercury. Mercury is in his first house in a conjunction with his sun. And so one of the things that you could probably say about this, merging this energy of second house themes of money, material possessions, and finance, and the first house of identity, right? And his persona, his image, right? One of the things that you could say about these combined energies is that money is a very important part of his self-image, and he might be known for his material possessions, his wealth, or the way that he utilizes material possessions or material matters in general. And so one of the things that you'll kind of see if you look into Walter Mercado is that he actually was very, very showy. He would kind of flaunt his wealth a little bit in terms of just, he had everything very extravagant. He wore extravagant robes, and he had beautiful sets that he would work with. He would always have like elaborate jewelry. He would have robes that were designed by like high-end designers, high-end fashion designers and things like that. And that was part of his public image and public persona. He also would, at the height of his career, he would drive around in limousines. He had a private airplane that he would travel in. And he wasn't like shy about these things. That was part of the image he was portraying. That was one of the things that he really put out there, was this luxurious, very material imagery around what he was doing. Obviously, he had like a spiritual message and an uplifting message, but he was very showy and generous with his resources. And that's also associated with that energy of the ruler of the second house of finance with the sun. That usually indicates somebody who is very generous with their resources. And in the first house, somebody who likes to show off or show that they have really nice things. Not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's in an egocentric way, but it is a thing, right? So that's that showmanship, that dramatic energy around material resources and material possessions, and the way that he portrayed his image. And that would be something that would be very important to his identity. His material possessions are part of his identity, right? And that is showing up in his chart. The other thing that you'll see here, though, in addition to this, is that he has a lot of challenging energy with Mercury, the ruler of his second house. He has Mercury in a conjunction with Chiron, and this is not a traditional interpretation because Chiron is more recently discovered, but I would say that he would have some sort of guilt, shame, vulnerability, trauma, or some sort of issue in terms of his self-image and his material resources. There could have been a lot of shame that he felt around maybe not having enough, or around the financial struggle that he had resulting from the legal battle that he incurred with his former manager and all of that. That's just me making an assumption, not knowing this for sure, but you can assume that there's some sort of wound, or there's some sort of shame, or there's some sort of trauma or difficult experience that hurt his ego or hurt him on a personal level related to, finances and material wealth. The other thing too that you see here, of course, is that Mars is in a square with his natal Mercury. Mars rules separation. So that would indicate, that at some point in his life, he would be separated from his resources. He would have some sort of challenge, dispute around resources. And so that showed up for him. There could be issues with writing, documents, contracts, which is very literally what happened, involving resources, documents and contracts and writing and, signing on the dotted line, using his signature, right? That's his identity, right? Signing on the dotted line, signing his signature on a legal document, that would be very mercurial in the first house, which is his identity, that could cause later on issues involving disputes, arguments, and separation involving his resources, right? Those are interpretations, or that would be one interpretation of that energy. One of the things his manager said actually in the documentary was that his family got involved and that was part of the issue, although it sounds like that manager was doing a lot of not so good stuff, kind of a shady character. But he did say that, and that was not something that that Walter Mercado said in the documentary. That's not something that his family stated. However, Mars in the fourth house, which rules family, in a conjunction with the moon in his fourth house, would indicate that that's potentially part of the case, or another layer to the story. The moon is the ruler of the third house of siblings, and also that has to do with writing contracts, things like that, but the house of siblings, right? And so you could maybe get from that his siblings were partially involved in this dispute, this argument, this legal battle that resulted from a contract that he signed, that he put his identity and stamp of approval, or he attached his identity, his name to, that was related to finances and resources. And what's interesting about this too, and this is something that I'll talk about a little bit more in the webinar, because I'm going to use him as an example for more than just finances, but I thought this was a good example for this video in particular. And there's a lot more that we could say about what's going on here in Walter Mercado's chart, beyond just the financial, and even more into the financial aspects of this. But I just wanted to give you guys something that I thought was a really good example of house rulerships and why it's important to look at them to get all of the information, a more holistic understanding of the topics associated with each house and how that's going to play out in each person's life. And so you can see from this example, it'd be hard to know all of those specific details or to connect them to his life by just looking at this chart without getting into the house rulerships. But once you apply house rulerships and interpretations using house rulerships, it gives you a lot more to go off of and to work with there. We'll get into more of his chart in the webinar because I'm going to use this as an example. It's a really good example of all sorts of things beyond just the financial, along with a bunch of other celebrity and real life client examples and things like that. But I just wanted to give you guys a taste of what's going on here. And so hopefully this helps you to understand how it works. So Gemini is occupying the second house in this chart here. Mercury is the ruler of Gemini. So Mercury, you would look to Mercury to get additional information. Mercury in the first house, that would be tied to the self-image, the body, the physical appearance. And then you kind of go from there, right? You look at the different aspects and you can get layers and layers and layers and much more detailed information, especially if you understand the symbolism behind the planet signs and houses. And that's going to be an important prerequisite to this course. But I know a lot of you study astrology. A lot of you are lifelong students of astrology. And so hopefully you'll get a lot from that and a lot from this video too, because I wanted to give you guys a taste. And so that way you can kind of get started with playing with things on your own here. All right, so thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with other people who are interested in learning about astrology if you feel like it might be helpful to them. All right, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time. And hopefully I'll see you in the webinar too. Bye.